Hello, welcome to vlog 10. Um, I was, I've been out for many days and not passed out, but out of vlog production, I suppose. And that was because I was hoping that I'd be able to go, hurrah, huzzah, I've got something made that works. It does, but a bit, just a bit. This is where we are. So, number of things to note. Well, let's just see it if it works first, shall we? It seems to work, right? But the more you do it, the more problems you start to notice. Do you see them? Okay, so first things first, the gears, they're not really good at holding their job. As you turn, sometimes it's really easy to turn the crank, sometimes all of a sudden it becomes really hard and you have to grab the crank and just rotate really hard. There's a number of reasons for that. One of them is because this gear ratio is 1 to 2, you have to put a lot more power to rotate this gear, especially when you're fighting against gravity, when all the weight is at the bottom or below the pivot point, and you need to lift all that weight back up over top of that pivot point. That's a problem. The other thing is you've got this Geneva drive mechanism, and when you rotate, that little pin there gets really close to the pivot point of this Geneva wheel, or the Maltese cross. So that also begs for a lot more input of power to rotate. So it becomes very unsmooth of an experience to actually rotate this thing. Some other problems? Well, instead of these dominoes, I was planning to use a regular professional domino, but they were too heavy. And I think these are 2 if I were to put all 7 of these down on here. Further, this does not stop perfectly horizontally. You have a line there, and what you'll very quickly notice, the base is flat, but this track is a bit to the left or right. In fact, it can go pretty far. Wait. Let me lock this in. Yes. As such, there's actually a lot of leeway for the track to move while it's in the locked in position. And I think that's because there's just wiggle room between the gears, the axles in their holes, the Geneva wheel and the Geneva drive wheel. All of that has some play in it, so that lets this whole thing rock. Not good. The other thing that I found really difficult is to consistently straighten a paper clip and insert them into these holes here, and then bend them to lock them in place. Usually by the time you've locked them in place, there's a part of it that's not straight in here, and that makes it much harder for this to pivot down. These dominoes, they're only half full, like 100% infill. The other half is hollow, so that lets this domino tip over a little bit easier, but there's still some problems with it. When this flips over, even when you put it on an even surface, you'll notice it's not perfectly vertical. So sometimes when the dominoes flip back over, this thing will fall prematurely, so that's not good. Some other problems is you've got the hand. You'll notice some paper fragments here, and that's because the tolerance is not good. Instead of having a tough or really tight fit when I slide this pin in, it just sort of wiggled around and it could just very easily slide out again. So I added some paper in between the parts to sort of lock it in place. But yeah, it's not nice looking, and when you print again, you're going to have to add the paper as well. So the actual model could use some finishing on there, like adjusting the tolerances. Um, Also, because this hand is a little heavier, this leverage or this lever system, this linkage system, is leaning that way a little bit. That's not very good. What else? I think that's about that for the problems. The hinges over here are actually used not with paperclip wire, but with actual hobby wire, which you would use with a breadboard. So that's that. So the hinges are a little weaker. That's pretty much all the problems. The other thing with cranks is I found out with people I've tested these kind of machines with, when you have a crank handle that's basically one piece, they will try to hold it, and then they will not allow this handle bit to rotate with the whole thing. So sometimes if there's not enough reinforcement, you could have the handle break or come off, especially if you made the handle out of paper. So I'm thinking of adding a shell around this handle so that it can rotate freely and you wouldn't have to rotate your hand as you move the crank. So there are a number of things I would redesign if I were to do a complete overhaul of this mechanism. One would be to replace all of these clips with just a custom domino that would have nubs, so you could just snap it in place into the track and have it work like that. Of course, it should be a little bit more reinforced, or at least a little better designed than domino rally tracks, which I think are known for snapping and breaking, because they provide a lot of extra dominoes with the little hinge pins in their kits. What else would I do? I would also not give the handle or put the crank right at this axle. I would put another 2:1 gear ratio here, where the crank is actually on the smaller gear right up here on this tower. That way you have to spin twice as much to get the same action, but you have, I think, half as much power needed to keep rotating. I might even reduce that even further to like 3:1 or something like that. But yeah, it is quite discouraging. After putting all this together, there are still some things that need to be addressed for this to be something that's worthwhile. The other thing is that these dominoes are actually quite large compared to the other parts, where you have like really intricate gears, a very small thickness and size. It'd be nice if I could scale this down and have like smaller dominoes, like just very tiny dominoes, just enough to demonstrate the effect and make it a little bit more portable as well. Speaking of size, or at least portability, this whole base could not be printed in one go, so I had to use like a slicer, or I had to slice this into two pieces using Fusion 360. So I used Inkscape to make this like a puzzle piece design and just slice through the base. Now, in hindsight, I should have actually added a gap in here so that it would actually be able to be put together. But it turns out it fit quite well. All I had to do was sand these really extreme corners, the top and bottom of this piece, so that it would actually slide together. And it fits very snugly. It's very solid. So I wouldn't fix that. That's pretty much that. Oh, also this hand silhouette was sort of traced from online clip art, but I adjusted it to how I like it, so that's that. some other ventures. I was thinking about some things I could print and then give away, and one of them is a maker coin. And I just recalled that my printer, the Prusa Mark 3S, actually came with a pre-sliced G code, So I actually made my own little planetary gear fidget in 2 hours, which is kind of nice. You can't see much if you hold the center in place and then rotate it. You could sort of see some action. But what I did was grab a hex gear, no, an Allen wrench, my biggest one, and if you stick that in the hole like so, you can then rotate it and watch as the center gear, the sun gear, rotates and the planetary gears around it moves. Like that. It's pretty cool. Though I wish you could use like your finger or something and just rotate it like that, but as it is, it's kind of cool. And although this took, I think, 2 hours or so, yeah, I think that's what I said, the parts themselves, each of them individually, are hollow inside, and it still took that 2 hours. So it's from all of that complicated silhouettes that you'd see. Like even every cross section, you'd get a bunch of stars and all the teeth of the gears. So that's why this took quite a while. I also got a box from Mefferts the other day, so I finally unboxed it. So stay tuned for that on 22 Puzzle 22. And that's pretty much my day. Anyways, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.